So let's get right to it. Let's talk about the opportunities to supplement your clinical income with writing and teaching. Okay, so first I'm going to talk about writing, then I'm going to talk about teaching, and it's all related. And one of the lessons that I really want you to take away from this is that the writing and the teaching and the consulting, which Steve just spoke about, the niche consulting, all intimately related. These activities feed one another. The more writing you do, the more consulting and teaching you'll be able to do. The more teaching you do, the more writing you'll be able to do, the more consulting you'll be able to do. It's a nice circle. And, I've been teaching for the last 4 or 5 years a full 2-day course on how to earn money as a physician writer. And there's 2 takeaways from that class that I try to give people. And when I start off, I'm usually the first speaker when we teach. What I want people to remember is the following, which I have in all caps here in your course book, is good things happen to those who write, to physicians who write. What do I mean by that? What I mean by that is that writing can open many, many doors. Some of them are easy to predict, and some of them are not so easy to predict. Once you start writing, your career, your life, your whole trajectory can change in wonderful ways. And again, sometimes it can be hard to predict, but I've seen it happen over and over and over again. And what I'd like to do is I'd like to give you some examples as we get a little bit further into this talk about how that has worked out for me personally, and you can maybe learn from an analogy. And then I'd like to talk about some physicians and how their writing has really enabled them to do what they want to do professionally, to make money, to have fun, to make a difference, to be heard. So many benefits we're going to talk about writing. Now, a little bit about me. We're going to keep this trickling down, right? As I said, I've written either 30 or 31 books I've co-authored. I kind of lost track. I've done a lot of writing. I used to do 1 or 2 books a year back in our day. Steve and I used to crank out. Our practice now is much more consulting and teaching because we've already established ourselves as an expert in many areas. So we're not doing as much writing. I do a lot more blog writing now, actually, to kind of keep ourselves out there and maybe establish new areas. But my background is this. I was a math major in college, okay? Generally not the best writers, right? I mean, I could write like a Sigma. That's it, right? So obviously as a lawyer, you get trained to write, you have to communicate well, but you don't have to be Hemingway, right? And, in terms of reading, I do a lot of reading of the news. I like to read history and things like that. I haven't read a novel in maybe 5 years, right? If you put a piece of literature in front of me, my wife once gave me a book from John Irving, guy from New Hampshire, the author from New Hampshire. He wrote literature, World According to Garp, this, that, the other thing. She gave me a book, A Prayer for the Owen Meany. Okay, literature. I mean, thick book. She told me to read it. I'd love it. I hated it. It took me like all summer to get through it. That's not me, right? I'm not that type of a person. But I've still been able to write 30 to 31 books. So you don't have to be Hemingway. You don't have to be John Irving. You don't have to be Shakespeare to do this. You can even be a math major. Okay? Now, a lot of people get intimidated by the whole writing process because they think of, oh my God, it's a book. How am I going to write a book? A book is hundreds of pages and everything else. And what I want to really make sure that you get is that you don't write a book all at once. You write it in pieces. And as they say, Rome wasn't built in a day. So we had speaking for us for many, many years, the late, great Michael Palmer. Real gentleman, helped a lot of people, made a lot of people happy with his writing. He's a novelist, physician novelist from the Boston area. Passed away a few years ago, but he taught for us for years and years and years. We'll talk about Michael in a little bit. And what he would always teach, and I think this is really good advice, he goes, look, you don't think you can write a book. Can you write a page for me? Everybody in the audience would say, yeah, I can write a page. They'll raise their hand. Then he'd say, well, can you do that every day? And they'd be like, yeah, why not? I can do that every day. I'm tough. I'm a doctor. He says, well, if you can write a page a day, after a year, that's a 365-page book. Blah, light bulb goes off, right? So don't get intimidated. If you want to write a book, you write a little bit of it at a time. Block out the time to do it. Make it happen. You can do that, all right? And then the other thing is, your book doesn't need to be War and Peace. It doesn't need to be 1,000 pages, 200,000 words, whatever it is. And even more importantly, especially now, as opposed to when we started, your writing doesn't have to be a book. And I'm going to give you a couple of examples of that later. You can do it with articles and blog posts, right? To establish your expertise so that establish your authority so that good things can happen to you, okay? The most important thing is to just get things moving and make things happen. Okay, let's talk about the benefits of the writing and the benefits of writing. And I mentioned this a few minutes ago as we were just getting started. First of all, it's fun. This is a survey course, and Steve and I are giving you a flavor to see if you might want to get into it, see if it might be a good fit for you, of 4 different things. Steve's talking about niche consulting, advantages and disadvantages of that, if this is a good fit for you. I'm talking about writing and teaching. Steve's going to talk about disability and file review consulting, and then I'm going to talk about expert witnessing and IMEs, mainly expert witnessing. What's the point of this course? Just to show you what's out there, to give you the advantages, the disadvantages, and for you to pick and choose, this might be a good fit for me. Okay? Now, let's talk about what the benefits of writing and whether or not it might be a good fit for you. Well, what's the first benefit? And I talked about this earlier. It's fun. Okay? Now, if you break out into a cold sweat of the thought of writing anything and you can't get past this and you just know that you hate writing, well then, this probably ain't for you. Okay? But, if it's just you really haven't applied yourself to writing, because if you're a medical doctor, that's really not the track that you have. A lot of you people are pre-med, you take English 101 and that's it. Okay? And then it's all science, science, science and everything else. But remember who you were in high school. Did you do well in English? Did you like writing? Can you put a sentence together? Right? So you guys are all so talented and so smart. I tend to believe that any doctor that puts his or her mind to it, if you guys can learn how to be a physician with all that takes, you could probably learn to be a pretty good writer. But again, putting the sentence together is not the be-all, end-all. It's the knowledge that you're imparting. That's the key, because you can actually have somebody help you do the writing, and we'll talk about that later. As I mentioned earlier, you get to learn a ton. I don't know any doctors that don't like to learn. And it's very, very satisfying. I find that I don't really know a topic until I either write about it or teach it. And a lot of times I do both, and then I really know a topic. And by being forced to write about something, I'm sure you've had this experience, you're really going to learn the topic. And I think that's very, very satisfying. Now, the name of this course is How to Supplement Your Clinical Income with Lucrative Home-Based Work. So, obviously, the nice thing about writing is you can do it from home. I'm actually on Cape Cod right now. I'm looking at a saltwater estuary here. I'm not quite at the beach, but close enough. You can do this from wherever. You can do it from an airplane if you're traveling. Doesn't really matter. You can do it from the break room, do it from wherever you want. And that's a huge thing for a lot of people. It's a huge perk. It's one of the things, we're still kind of in the COVID lockdown right now as I'm recording this. And the more that you can do remotely, the better. It's kind of a game changer. You can do it on your own hours. So typically when you're writing, if you're writing for yourself, there is no deadline. Do it whenever you want. If you're writing for somebody else and there is a deadline, generally speaking, they don't give a darn when you do it. If you do it at 4 o'clock in the morning, if you do it 4 o'clock in the afternoon, if you do it 9 o'clock at night, you do it 11 o'clock at night. It doesn't matter. Just as long as you get it done by the deadline. That's what people hiring you to do writing want. Or if you went to a publisher and they say, we need the manuscript by X date, well, you want to get it done. So, huge advantage, having your own hours. I mean, try that with your clinic. Ain't happening, right? You don't need boards, and you don't even need a license, right? Just not required. Say you're older, you don't want to keep up, you don't want to recertify MOC, which I think is ridiculous, but that's another story, right? Don't have to do that stuff. Right? And I know it's an enormous time suck that you guys have to go through with all that stuff. Well, let's say you're a younger doctor and you're thinking, maybe I don't want to go through, finish residency and everything else. Well, you can write. No reason you can't. You can make money doing this stuff. This is a course about making money. Making money is okay. Making money is good. Give you a smiley face there. I'm not so good at drawing things. And then where the money really is is you can generate lucrative consulting and teaching gigs. And your teaching gigs can also help you sell your writing. We'll talk about that. You put the books in the back. When you have your teaching gig, they promote the book and your bio and things like that. So I think that there are tremendous benefits of writing, and I don't see much downside to it. We're going to talk about expert witnessing a little bit later, and tremendous benefits to that as well, but there's more downsides. You get yelled at, right? I mean, people accuse you of, not telling the truth. The scheduling, I think, can be a little bit tough occasionally. There's tight deadlines. You really don't have that so much with, probably need to keep your boards. We're going to talk about that later. But with writing, you don't have any of that. And, the other thing is, just like the consulting, the niche consulting that Steve was talking about, I guess I didn't write this down in the book, you can write about whatever you want. Now, what should you write about and what do you want to write about? We'll talk about that a little bit. So I think this is a wonderful field. It's been wonderful for me. I've learned a lot. It's really helped propel my career, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that right now.